Hi everyone, it's Chris and welcome back to another video. Thank you for joining me today. Now I'm going to continue with my series that I call Favourite 5, where I share my favourite 5 records from any one band or artist. Today's choice is Be-Bop Deluxe, one of the most fascinating and underrated bands of the 1970s. They were led by visionary Bill Nelson, who blended glam, rock and prog and guitar virtuosity into a kind of a sound that was uniquely their own. But their journey was pretty short, spanning just 5 studio albums, so that makes it really easy to choose my favourite 5. And then he moved on to a very different solo album where he produced loads of stuff. A little bit more about that later on. So here are my favourite 5 albums. I've also got my favourite 5 tracks, and I've got my favourite 5 Bill Nelson solo tracks as well. So in 5th place, I've gone with this album from 1978. This is Drastic Plastic. Now, by 1978, I think Be-Bop Deluxe had undergone a significant transformation as a band. And with this, which is their final album, Bill Nelson pushes the band into new territory, kind of electronic territory, new wave kind of territory, shedding much of the kind of glam and progressive influences that defined their earlier work. And this, what we've got here is a really bold, adventurous record, I think. Now, I wasn't into Be-Bop Deluxe back in 78. I'd seen them on Ogre Whistle Test, but I wasn't really into them. They're a band that I got into sort of 20, 30 years ago now. But I think this, whilst I think it was divisive possibly at the time with fans of Be-Bop Deluxe, it's one of the most forward-thinking albums, I think, of the late 70s. Now, gone are the kind of ornate arrangements, soaring guitar solos. You don't get that on this album. Instead, I think this embraces a much more kind of minimalistic, sharper sound, influenced by maybe Kraftwerk style electronics, those jaggedy new wave rhythms, you know, post-punk, that kind of stuff. Tracks like Electrical Language, New Mysteries, they incorporate synth-driven sounds that would later become a staple of Bill Nelson's solo work. And there's a song on here, Panic in the World. I love that. That remains one of the, I think, one of the band's most urgent and anthemic songs. And the track that closes the album, Love in Flames, has an almost punk-like energy to it, actually, and that really signals the band's shift towards a much more streamlined, much more direct songwriting kind of approach. Now, this album sounds quite lean, it sounds quite modern, it sounds quite stripped down compared with previous stuff. And I think it's aged really, really well. It was a daring reinvention at the time and kind of fitting, if unconventional, farewell to Be-Bop Deluxe. So anyway, that's Drastic Plastic from 78. In 4th place, Modern Music from 76. This is an album that further defined their kind of art rock sound, and there is some great guitar work on here. Bill Nelson was an absolutely fantastic guitarist, and it retains a kind of polished production that the other albums have, but I think it's more sophisticated, a little bit more ambitious than stuff that's come before. The opening song, Orphans of Babylon, that kind of, from that moment onwards, it's pretty clear that this is an evolution rather than a repeat of what's come before. It's kind of atmospheric, it's a layered album, there's greater use of orchestration of synthesizers, but there's still some of that trademark guitar work on here as well. There is some really rock moments, so Down on Terminal Street, for example, it's artful, it's melodic, but it's you know, it sounds a little bit rawer than the rest of the album possibly. And there's also a 12-minute suite called the Modern Music Suite, which is kind of, you know, multi-part, interconnected songs that really and you know, flow really seamlessly between each other. Fantastic stuff. It's produced by a guy called John Leckie, longtime kind of partner of and friend of Bill Nelson, and it's a really sonically good album, and I think it marks the beginning of a shift in Bill Nelson's songwriting, kind of hinting at the more experimental direction that he'd take later on in his career. So anyway, that's Modern Music from 76. At number 3, some days actually I might even have this higher. This is their debut from 74. I love this album. It's a fascinating introduction to Bill Nelson's kind of early vision, a blend of prog and glam and art rock. Released in, I think it's 74, I'm pretty sure it is. It's often compared with kind of Ziggy Stardust era David Bowie, but it's got much more guitar on it. It does lean heavily into glam musically and visually. And you know, the title track, Axe Victim, it really opens the album with a really grandiose kind of tone. And songs like Jet Silver and the Dolls of Venus, which kind of doesn't sound like Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars, but it's got a title that sounds like that. It really showcases Bill Nelson's knack for theatrical rock arrangements. It's a great song. Guitar solos on here, technically brilliant, expressive, absolutely full of emotion. That's a hallmark, I think, of Bill Nelson. And this is less polished and more raw than the albums that followed it, but songs like Love is Swift Arrows, Rocket Cathedrals, they're really sophisticated songs. And I think if you are a fan of kind of 70s glam, I think this is an essential listen. And if you're interested in the evolution of Bill Nelson, this is a great starting point. And despite being overshadowed by the later albums, this remains a personal favourite, actually. And on some days, this might even be my favourite album by Be-Bop Deluxe. That's from 74, their debut. In second place is their second album from 75. This is Futurama. And this, as a new band, and it marks a significant leap, I think, in with the band, both conceptually and musically. Now, Bill Nelson is now firmly in control, got a new lineup, and it sheds much of that kind of glam rock kind of feel and influence of this debut in favour of a more sophisticated mix of art rock and prog and some absolutely dazzling guitar. The production on it is really sharp, the arrangements are intricate. Bill Nelson's guitar work is absolutely brilliant, full of kind of melody and dramatic shifts. It's a really good album. There's a song on here called Made in Heaven, which is reasonably famous song, I think, by them. It's only about 2.5 minutes long. Great riff, hooky chorus, kind of one of the most well-known songs probably of Be-Bop Deluxe's career. You might recognise the sort of artwork on here. The same guy did the stickers on Dark Side of the Moon. So what we've got on here is kind of dreamy atmospheres, technically brilliant instrumentation, fluid, expressive guitar. It's produced by Roy Thomas Baker, this album, who, obviously did work with Queen, and therefore it's not Queen-like, but it's very, very polished. And I think is a pivotal album in their discography, as it bridges the kind of raw energy, I think, of stuff like Axe Victim that he did prior to this, and a more kind of refined art rock sound of the albums that followed. So if you're a fan of art rock or guitar music, then this is absolutely essential, and that's my second place. Futurama. And my favourite album by them is a lot of people's favourite album. It's from 76, and it's this one, Sunburst Finished. And I think by this time they'd become a real art rock powerhouse. This is ambitious, it's polished, but it's accessible and adventurous. It's again produced by Roy Thomas Baker, and I think it's arguably their definitive statement. It's packed full of memorable songs, dazzling guitar work, and it absolutely exudes confidence. It's a tremendous album. There's driving rhythms. There's some musically the band are really tight. Simon Fox, Charles Tumahai, Andrew Clark, great musicians. Musically it's quite complex, but it's immediate. It's a lovely balance, and his guitar playing on here I think is absolutely at its peak, and what he blends here is technical brilliance with emotional depth, and for me that's a real hallmark of Bill Nelson. So Ships in the Night, I think that had some mainstream success. It's kind of got a little reggae tinge to it. I'll share my favourite song from here later on, but there's a song on here called Ships That Burn, which Sleep That Burns, which is kind of shifts between kind of rocky moments and dreamy atmospherics, and then there's a good finale in Blazing Apostles. But I think this is essential for anybody who's interested in the artier side of 70s rock music, and I think is a shining example not just of his genius as a guitarist, but also his genius as a songwriter. Fantastic album. And although I don't include live albums in my favourite fives, because I think they would possibly dominate, and nod to this one. This is Life in the Air Age, an absolutely brilliant live album. It's a single live album, but with a free EP, which has got 3 songs on it. So, but it's a great album. The fourth side, so there's 2 sides of vinyl, and there's 2 sides on the EP, obviously. But the fourth side, which is the album side, has Mill Street Junction, Adventures in a Yorkshire Landscape, and Blazing Apostles. That is a absolutely brilliant side of vinyl. So if you like the kind of guitar work of Bill Nelson, that is a must listen album. And there's some really good versions of these albums that have kind of remasters and so on. And the one that I really like, there's a fantastic CD version of this with some kind of stereo mixes and session versions of the songs. Absolutely brilliant stuff. Okay, I've written down my favourite songs. Now, some albums might dominate in this, so what I've done is basically have one song from each album and put them into a rank order. So at number 5 is from this album, from Modern Music, and it's Bring Back the Spark, which is kind of an up-tempo song, different from the other songs possibly on the album, but I think it's absolutely brilliant. That's my 5th favourite Be-Bop Deluxe song. At number... what album is it on? This one. At number 4, going to Drastic Plastic from 78, their final studio album, and it's Panic in the World, which is a marvellous song. It's got such a brilliant melody, such a brilliant hook. It's a great little anthem. I love it. Panic in the World from 78. Drastic Plastic, that's from. My 3rd favourite Be-Bop Deluxe song comes from this album. Their kind of rocky art rock, glam rock album, Axe Victim, and it's No Trains to Heaven. It's just brilliant. Again, it's up-tempo. The guitar work on it is absolutely off the chart. It's brilliant. And so that's my 3rd favourite song by them. No Trains to Heaven from Axe Victim. At number 2, I'm going to my 2nd favourite album, Futurama. And a song it's on side 1, I think. Yeah, it closes side 1. It's called Soundtrack. It starts off quite proggy, boom, ba boom, ba boom, really proggy kind of beginning, but it's got some. It's not too long. As I said earlier, I think some bands would stretch these songs out quite a lot. Be-Bop Deluxe don't stretch their songs out too much, and Soundtrack is a fantastic song, and that's my 2nd favourite song by Be-Bop Deluxe. My favourite one by them is from my favourite album by them, so from Sunburst Finish from 76. And it's Crying to the Sky. Now, this is a song that lots of other bands would have extended into the 10-minute range and extended the guitar solos. But in some ways, with this band, less is more. And what you get with Crying to the Skies, I think it's a homage to Jimi Hendrix, with some absolutely beautiful guitar work. The first solo is quite short, but the emotion just drips out of it. It's absolutely fantastic. And he has that knack of innovation and ambition and technical brilliance and absolute emotion in his guitar work. And Crying to the Sky, wow, what the guitar work on that is absolutely brilliant. So that's my favourite Be-Bop Deluxe song. So let's look at some of his solo work very quickly. I don't have a massive amount of his solo records. They're very different to Be-Bop Deluxe, and some of them are kind of a little bit ambient and a little bit different, and some of them are just kind of longer EPs as well. But he's quite prolific as a solo artist, and I've only got a few. So these are my 5 favourite Bill Nelson solo tracks, almost like as a starting point maybe to listen to if you're unfamiliar with his work. Okay, I've written these down. So in 5th place is a song from this album. No, it's not from this album. Sorry, it's from this album. So this is Red Noise from 79. This is the first album he did when he left Be-Bop Deluxe. And if you were a Be-Bop Deluxe fan at the time, I don't know if you would have been ready for this. It's quite jarring in places, actually. But I love the song that closes the album. It's called Revolt into Style. I love the kind of jaggedy guitar on it. It's a really good track. So that's my 5th favourite solo Bill Nelson song. At number 4, I'm going to choose a song from this album. We'll say it's an album. It's got 6 songs. It's probably more of a long EP, really. Chimera. And the song on this, I think, was a single, actually. It's called Acceleration. It's a fantastic, again, real good hook to it. A really good song. Kind of not synth pop, but it's different to Be-Bop Deluxe, probably more in line to the Drastic Plastic kind of sound, but it's a great song. That's Acceleration from Chimera. I don't know what year that is, actually. Probably early 80s. Okay, at number 3 going to this album. This is called, the album's called The Love That Whirls. And at number 3 is the opening track, which is very synth pop. This is an 82 album after all. And the song is called Empire of the Senses, which is a beautiful song. Really, really good song, but it's very synth pop. It's very, not much guitar on this album, and it's quite different to Be-Bop Deluxe, but that's a great song. I love it. And that's at number 3. At number 2, I'm going to this album, which we had a sneak preview of a minute ago. This is Quit Dreaming and Get On The Beam. Now, there's a couple of singles that came from this album. I think Youth of Nation on Fire was a single. Do You Dream in Colour, which is a great song, that was a single. But the track I'm choosing is the opening track, which is called Banal, which is really, really good song. I love it. And that's my second favourite Bill Nelson solo song. And my favourite one by him, going back to this album, Chimera, or this long EP, and the song is the closing song of this album. It's called Another Day, Another Ray of Hope. It's just synth. It's quite synthy. It's just melodic. It's just beautiful. It's a fantastic song. Another Day, Another Ray of Hope. Bill Nelson, great artist, fantastic career. Brilliant, some really good solo stuff, but Be-Bop Deluxe, wow, really worth looking at if you haven't really investigated them. Hopefully what I've done today is just given you a starting point. Tell me what your favourite songs are by this band in the comments below, and I'm sure I'll be back sometime with another video. Cheers.